problems like this doesn't make sense and this doesn't make sense, when it's almost like the self-consistency of cosmology is so almost like viciously guarded. I just, it's, I've never gotten so much a kind of unexpected vitriol. And then,
Well, you won't get that vitriol from physicists, I can tell you that. And if you want, we can get into what your statement might mean, but carry on.
that, okay, so my sense, and maybe these are not like real physicists, but my sense is that there's like a, you know, cranks, physics cranks.
Sure.
Are there other fields where there are slurs for people that I don't know, like a dismissive slur to be like, this is preposterous, you have no idea what you're talking about. It just seems very odd. So I don't really know physicists, but I've spoken to a few. Actually, I had a physicist storm off my podcast.
Why is that?
Because I disagreed with him about a gravitational lensing argument we got into. And he was like...
That's a strange thing to storm off about, I guess.
Well, that's what I thought,
but you really didn't like?
I just said I don't think I agree. I don't think I agree with your conclusion.
And he wasn't able to explain why he had that conclusion?
I don't know if he didn't want to or wasn't able to. And I understand that he kind of came on, I think, with the... He was like... I think he came on to like explain to me, to reassure me that the universe isn't a black hole. I think maybe he thought I hadn't really thought it through and that I didn't like literally mean like an actual like geometry. I think he just thought he didn't know what I was talking about at all.
Okay, can I defend him slightly? Only slightly.
You can defend him as much as you want.
Well, no, I don't really want to, but I want to defend him slightly. One
Okay.
problem that does happen with physics professors, and I know lots of physicists, obviously, because I went to graduate school with them, is that they get an enormous number of what you just said, papers from people that think that they've just invented the new theory of everything, or that they've disproved, 20th century physics or whatever it is, and frequently they get inundated with this stuff. And it's relatively rare for an outsider to have really come with a thoughtful question and a carefully worded question. And what tends to happen is that you get a little bit emotional about it, and you say, well, basically, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. My guess, this
What's
is why
the emotion?
Irritation.
About
having to do it again. About having to explain yet again to yet another person from outside the field what they think of as settled science, as it were. Because it's not even so much the explaining, it's the fact that a lot of the people that come, and I'm not saying necessarily this applies to you, but a lot of people that come from outside the field have essentially not even a high school understanding of physics. So they make elementary errors and then keep insisting that they're right. And so your experience, your lived experience as a physics professor, is that you have to keep fighting this over and over and over again. And so sometimes, even if you don't mean to, you can touch that nerve, and then the person will just say, oh my God, I can't believe I'm dealing with this.
Storming arrow.
But isn't your status and station dependent on people not understanding physics? Like all of your whole career, it requires people to not understand what you're talking about for you to have a job. Because if everybody understood it, then physicists wouldn't even be like a thing.
Yeah, and yes and no. That's a very good question. No, mostly no, with some quantity of yes. Mostly no, because physics is dependent upon entirely the goodwill of strangers to get it funded. Because physics, particularly fundamental physics, is by definition useless.
But
it will become useful 100 years or 200 years from now. It won't be useful now.
Cosmology, I think, is useless.
That's right. But you never know. I mean, the general theory of relativity was useless until people used it to create GPS for satellite phones, right? And now the iPhone runs on the general theory of relativity, which is, of course, cosmology. But you don't know that when you do it. So no one makes any money from physics. So
Okay,
physicists
but
are
this,
dependent upon the goodwill of others.
but then this is okay. This is the family systems thing. Physicists are angry that they're dependent on the goodwill of random people.
Yes.
And the crank thing is them taking that anger and resentment out on the people, some of the people who are the most interested.
In part, yes. In part, yes. The thing is that if those cranks were people that funded science, right, or physics in general, I promise you, this is always the case with everybody, right? That's where your bread is buttered.
They'd be
put
very
up with
nice.
it. Exactly. You got it. But the cranks are rarely, well, for the lack of a better word, rich.
Okay, but then there's another angle, which is if you feel that the funding for your career is precarious,
Yeah.
the insinuation of somebody like, well, I just talked to ChatGPT and I think I figured it out. If that's true, that's threatening.
Yes, it is.
And
but it's also an opportunity.
So I think that I think it's inevitable that outsiders who don't think like, physicists or surgeons or whatever are going to start solving puzzles using AI. I think this
true.
is inevitable. And then, but then
Absolutely.
also AI is very bias confirming. So we're going to have this wave of people who are like, I think I figured something out.
Yes.
And some portion of them will just be, told that they did because an LLM is being nice
Yes.
to them. And then,
Yes.
but I think it will really start to happen.
Yes, it's already happening to some extent, by the way.
Yeah.
That's already true. And that's the second thing that ends up irritating a lot of professional physicists is that they have to do a lot of stuff that's not directly related to their research, administrative stuff and so on. A lot of professors' time is spent on administrative trivia, which is very upsetting. And this then just feels like another imposition on their time, whereas they got into the field because they were excited to do something new and discover new knowledge. That's my limited defense. It's a
Okay, but
limited
this guy's a science communicator, and he agreed to come on the podcast to talk about
Oh,
whether
well.
the universe. It's not like I didn't like prank call him. He came on the podcast to talk about whether the universe is a black hole. And
then I gave up.
Good.
I gave up.
Good. Okay.
I tried.
Okay.
But
Well,
let's talk about the fact whether the universe is a black hole, if you want to.
Sure.
Okay. So you have to first think about what a black hole is.
Okay.
So a black hole is a statement that the force of gravity has become so strong in some region of space that nothing, including light, can escape from inside that region of space.
Okay.
Right? Now,
I think this is sort of a Newtonian description, but it's correct.
well, no, I mean that's standard classical general relativity. There's nothing.
Well, relativity doesn't
anything
have
different.
force. You said the force of gravity. I don't think relativity even has gravity. It just has
Well,
curvature.
actually, it depends how you just want to think about it. You can think of it either way. They both. It's either a force or it's curvature. They're complementary descriptions and they're identical. By the way, it doesn't change the law. You can say equivalently, if you wish, that the curvature of space-time has become so extreme that it's not possible to escape that curvature. But it's the same statement.
Well, I think it's. I think there's a difference.
What's the difference? Mathematically, there are differences.
Conceptually, they're different. I think.
Okay, pick one.
I think-
Doesn't matter.
Well, I would choose the curvature one because
The geometric. Okay, let's take the curvature. That's fine. That's cool. So now
I
let's
think-
move over to the universe.
Okay.
So the universe, in effect, has an event horizon. The event horizon is because of the speed of light. There is a certain point at which you will never be able to see beyond that point. Even if the universe exists beyond that point, you will never be able to see it.
Well, you're inverting my model. So I view it in reverse. that
which is
the causal horizon at the edge of the universe is the singularity, and the observer at the center is the event horizon.
I don't know about the latter, but I can tell you that there's absolutely nothing wrong with viewing the former, that is to say, the horizon at infinity, or figurative infinity, as being a horizon. You can absolutely do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's questions about this thing called the holographic principle, and whether that applies to the whole universe in any case. And I won't get into what the holographic principle is, but there are in fact legitimate lines of inquiry in physics that are asking the question of whether the universe is in fact a white hole, if you wish, the inverse of a black hole.
So, in my model, the reason I want the curvature thinking, is because if all light rays terminate at the singularity, and any observer is forced to construct their perceptual frame from those light rays. So any direction you point a laser pointer, you're pointing at the singularity. Then the singularity should not be thought of as a spatial point at the center, which is what you would see if you were outside of a black hole. But if you're inside of a black hole, I think that it would appear as a big sphere around you in every direction, stretching.
I don't know if you can say that from the inside of a black hole, unless it's a very large black hole, because space inside the black hole is also stretched. And as you start to approach the center of the black hole, you are being destroyed. You're being basically broken into component atoms. So you wouldn't be able to look back at the horizon at that point as a conscious observer.
So I think that the standard spaghettification story is mixing a spatial coordinate with a temporal coordinate.
That is general relativity, though. That's what it does. It mixes spatial and temporal coordinates.
I'm sorry, I mean not mixing. I mean reversing. I think that you are speaking about the singularity as though it can occupy one spatial location. When from the outside, if you were outside of a black hole, it does. It's the center. But if you were inside of a black hole, I don't think you would perceive it as occupying a single location, because the null rays that you construct your observer frame from, where you're like, okay, I'm a person, I'm looking around. Everywhere you look, from your perspective, in a straight line, is the singularity, which makes it a sphere.
The problem is that, well, it could be rotating, in which case it's not a sphere anymore. The situation is that whenever a gravitational field becomes strong enough, we don't have any good way of modeling what would happen to anything other than space-time in that area. In other words, if you put matter into that area, we don't know what to do with it, because that's quantum field theory in curved space-time, which interestingly is what my paper is about, or my chapter is about in the book that's coming out. And so you can only really do that in weak gravitational fields. So until we have some kind of a viable theory of quantum gravity, which can deal with very strong gravitational fields, it's very difficult to make any definitive statements about those areas.
Well, I don't think we need to make a definitive statement. I just think if you're willing to say that you would be spaghettified if you fell into a black hole, you're already making statements about what happens in a black hole.
No, that's before you get to the center, though. You can see that in what are called tidal forces and shearing forces.
I understand, but I'm saying that there is no center to get to. Just definitionally, this is why I don't want the Newtonian version, because the idea of gravity kind of invokes that there is a center that is not changing into something else.
No,
because
you can define a patch of space-time. Forget center. Just define a patch of space-time. Any approach to even that patch of space-time, forget the center, is going to start to produce spaghettification because of all those changes in the space-time itself. You
when
can
you
see that
say
in the metric.
when you say I'm going to define a patch of space-time, you're still invoking a God's eye view where the patch has a consistent shape over time. You're talking about a static patch, but any
No, it doesn't have
observer.
to be a static patch. No, it doesn't have to be a static patch. It can be just a definition using the metric, right? The metric is what defines what the space looks like.
So this is part of. I don't think this. I don't agree with this, and I agree with it in theory. You can draw a map and then say I drew this map of a black hole and it has a center and it has an edge.
Yep.
If you're inside of it and trying to draw a map of it, you will not draw that map. You will not draw a singularity at a single spatial location as space is defined by you. So if you're inside of a black...
That's right, but that depends on the metric.
I'm just talking about a symmetrical, non-rotating black hole.
So you want a simple Schwarzschild black hole.
Yes.
And you're saying in a simple Schwarzschild black hole, what will happen as you start to approach the center?
No. I'm saying that there is no center for an observer who is inside of a black hole. And the reason is that I think physicists in thinking in GR tend to treat the metric as primary. But the metric has to be constructed via available data. And so if you are actually already in a black hole and you have to build a metric from the information that you see, and you have to say, okay, where is the singularity? The answer to this question, any direction you point, the answer is yes, it is there. Any direction you point, any spatial direction, the singularity is there, and it will appear to be there in a straight line. Even though, yes, in the metric, if you're outside of a black hole, you see that that's not true. It's only in one specific location. But that location expands due to gravitational lensing because every path leads there. If you're trying to construct a metric to describe the space-time that you're in, and you're already inside of a black hole, and operationally for you there is no outside, you are forced to draw a map where the singularity is a sphere around you in every direction. And that's what you will experience and see. And everything, all physics will come from that. And so I think that there is a kind of conceptual frame blending that happens when we talk about something like spaghettification, because you're thinking of what a black hole looks like from the outside. Yes, of course, there's an infinite curvature spike at the center that it leads to infinite tidal forces that rips anything apart. That's true from the outside, but if you're actually born on the inside and you're trying to construct what I've been calling in the papers perceptual coordinates, the idea that you don't actually get this God's eye view, you are forced to create your observer frame from available data, and all that available data points to the singularity, making it a sphere.
So I think the issue with that is the following. The statement is that when you cross an event horizon, you as an observer will feel nothing, even though you've just crossed event horizon.
I don't think I agree with this, but I don't even think crossing an event horizon is possible. So in my model, there's no exterior. You can't get out of a black hole.
Yeah, well, you can't anyway.
Meaning there is no outside. Once you're in a black hole, it's not even that you can't get out, it's that there isn't an outside.
Well, so this comes back to the original question that we were talking about. That is part of why people have been thinking about white holes and black holes in relation to the universe.
Well, I think
because you can't get out of the universe either.
Exactly. And so, but I think that people have the map reversed. I think that when you're in a black hole, you are always the furthest thing from the singularity. because all paths lead from the observer to the singularity. Just that's how the geometry is constructed. It's inherently observer-centric.
Have you tried to write down the maths for this?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm doing my best with LLMs. I don't. The thing is that there are so many idealizations being made. So another thing I've been writing about a lot is that physicists, or GR tends to treat the observer as point-like,
yep.
and when you treat an observer as finite and expanding, the observer itself is expanding with the geometry, which it has to be, then I think that also undermines some of the assumptions of the standard model, like a universal scale factor. If everything scales up uniformly, and you're a point, then you'll be able to see that. But if you also scale up uniformly, then it's not going to look like anything's happened. Like if everything in your office tripled in size right now at the same time, you wouldn't notice.
There are very complicated questions that you are raising that
Thank
come
you.
from these issues.
Yeah.
And they all essentially actually boil down in the end to we don't have a viable theory of quantum. If we did, all of this would in fact be relatively straightforward to answer, because that would be the thing that would allow you to connect the micro scale to the macro scale. And the issue with GR is it is true that you are assuming all kinds of idealizations.
I think if you take out the
true,
I think if you take out the
but
idealizations,
you don't know what happens if you take them out. That's the problem.
Well, that's what this series is trying to do. I think if you remove object idealizations, like there are no objects, that doesn't make sense in a geometric view. If you remove spatial idealizations, like the idea of space, things happening, there's no such thing as actual space between objects. And then especially the point-like observer that does not scale stretch with the environment, that somehow the observer is floating in the geometry instead of constructed from the geometry. I think if you remove those idealizations, the goal of the series is to show that not only does the universe look like a black hole, it definitionally already just has to be a black hole interior.
So have you looked at the Wolfram Physics project?
No.
You should do that.
Okay. Wolfram Physics Project?
Yes, just Google it. You'll find it.
Okay.
This is an attempt to construct everything from nothing more than points and connections between points. And the advantage of doing things that way is that you have made no idealizations of any kind.
Yeah.
And you can try to ask questions that would be very difficult to be asked if idealizations have been made. They figured out a whole bunch of interesting things. Some of it is very hand wavy, some of it is quite accurate, some of it is interesting. You should take a look at it. It's the only project I know of its kind.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out. I definitely don't want to be hand wavy. The goal of my project is to start with the large scale, the top down view, use GR on a cosmic scale to start, and so you don't make the Copernican principle assumption. You take what you see as literal, and so an isotropic expanding geometry in which you are at the center, and you don't just think you're at the center, and it doesn't just look like you're at the center, you literally are at the center, and then work down from there.
So the resistance you're going to get to that is the deeply held philosophical belief in physics.
Yes.
Very deeply held.
Yes.
That you cannot put humans at the center of anything.
Right. And I think this is a mistake. Either very well intentioned, like we don't want to say the sun revolves around the earth, but I don't think that is true. I think that, again, this is again why I think the universe is a black hole, is that it is a inherently observer-centric geometry where you can't move from the center. No one can move from the center.
So what
Also,
would be interesting is if you could do some of the math to figure out what the observable consequences of this are, that would be very interesting.
well, the goal is to show that what we see is that you would, if you were surrounded by, if you'll grant me the gravitational lensing argument, if you were surrounded by a big singularity shell, you would see exactly what we're seeing. You would see space stretching out. You would see galaxies receding and redshifting to a causal edge, which is why I thought of it in the first place.
So the issue typically with scientists is, unless you can show them something that's inconsistent with their view,
But okay, so this
they're
is
not
the other,
going to listen.
this is why the series has to get aggressive a little bit.
Okay.
The standard model of cosmology is touted as this amazing show of consistency, right?
No. It's
Okay.
touted amongst professional cosmologists as our current best explanation, where we already know it has significant holes and we're trying to patch them.
Okay. That's good. That's good to hear. So the goal is to show, without any dark energy or dark matter, why we see what we see. Why does gravity only work here around humans, and then it slowly stops working as you get further out?
The closest people I know that are trying to do what you're talking about is the Wolfram Physics Model.
Okay.
You
Well,
should take a look at it.
I will take
because
a look at it.
it's because he also gets into the philosophical questions of what is an observer.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well,
And by the way, that's a major problem in physics. What is an observer?
yeah, I think it has to just be a machine, a toaster, that can
The
write
problem
down.
is the toaster is made up of the same stuff that it's observing.
Yeah, it's a patch of geometry
It's an issue.
that it's a patch of geometry that can create and then read back language, which is what time is. Is you're writing things down and then reading them.
So that's the Wolfram viewpoint, more or less.
Okay. Well, that's cool. I'll check it out. Yeah.
What was
Well-
your other question? You said you had two things you wanted to.
So this guy called in to my call-in show, and he said, "How do we improve relations between men and women?" He was. I get people asking me about dating advice, and social commentary, and so it's a kind of combination of like basically why is there a problem? Why don't women want to date men right now? And he said, how would you teach kids to be better at dating, basically, or better at getting along? And so I was talking about like how the grading system in school feels kind of anti-consent, where like you're never allowed to say no to a school assignment, and if you do, that's never seen as a good thing. It's kind of interesting that you're taught never to say no to authority or to kind of like this force. And then I was thinking about how that carries over into relationships when people expect other people to just do what they say and like don't know how to handle it when someone sets boundaries.
Yep.
And then he brought up the birth rate. He was saying the U.S. birth rate is dropping. How do we fix that? And I said, well, I don't think you can assume that women want to have babies.
Correct. You can't.
Because
And
they
shouldn't.
might just, right, I said they might just not want to.
Yep.
And evidence suggests that when women are happier and more into, or I don't know if they self-report as happier, but I think they're happier. Like, obviously, I know that there's always like some article, it's like this hyper regimented traditional community is the happiest place
Yes,
on earth
yes.
because
I've
they
seen
all
those
said,
too. I don't
yeah,
believe
and
it, but anyway,
no,
carry on.
yeah, like that's not my definition of happiness.
Yep.
So when women have freedom, independence, money, agency, they don't have enough babies to sustain a human population. It could be that there is some other problem than that. If maybe that Sky is right, that if you treat them better, or interpersonal things get better, or men get more impressive or something, then maybe they do start having 3 babies per woman. I don't know, but there is some evidence that suggests that that might just not be true. So I said I'm a feminist, and so if you're a feminist or even a progressive, you have to accept human extinction as the preferred choice if women don't want to have babies. If you accept a woman saying no to sex once, you have to be consistent. You have to accept all of them saying no.
Sure.
So I wrote an essay with this hypothetical, which is, imagine that women just don't like having, whatever your definition of this is, women don't like having babies enough to sustain any human population.
Yep.
Do you choose to psychologically or physically coerce them to reproduce, or do you allow humanity to go extinct?
You allow humanity to go extinct, who cares?
That's what I said. And people are mad. They're like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't apply to reality. This isn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Why can't we just use social programs? If you think subsidy, so then I'm like, well, I asked you to define coercion for yourself. So if you think subsidies are coercive, then I mean you can make a frame where they are, but
Yep.
it just feels like nobody wants to engage with the question.
No, they don't. But look, there's a lot of ways of engaging with the question. If you frame the hypothetical the way you just framed it, there is only one answer, and the one answer is that since I'm not going to countenance any kind of coercion of anybody for any reason.
Half of my audience chose coercion.
Yeah, I know. I read that argument actually.
Okay.
I saw that. That doesn't fly. I think that's just nuts. The second point is, though, that from a practical point of view, which is not the theoretical point of view, from a practical point of view, the fewer babies there are, the more valuable each baby is going to be. So it's possible. I'm not saying it will happen, but it is possible, quite possible perhaps even, that as the number of humans falls, the value of having babies is going to go up, and women may choose to have more of them.
Oh, sure.
But
I mean, it could be
choice.
It could be that the decision to have babies is genetic, so you're just left with all the women who have lots of babies.
And that's true too.
There's tons of ways that this could not happen, but I'm interested in why so many, I think, men want to go to a place of like, well, maybe this isn't happening, because it looks like maybe it is happening. And the point of my essay is to say that I think ethically it has to be considered that they might just not like having babies.
Sure, they might, and so what? I mean, that's life, and if humans
Well,
don't
it's not
exist
life,
in the
it's
universe,
death.
then, well, no, it's not death. It's just eventually the human race will cease to exist. Okay, so what? I mean, the universe isn't going to care, and neither would the laws of physics.
You view humanity as already doomed.
No, I view humanity as going to be whatever it's going to be, and since I think that coercion is roughly almost the worst thing that anybody can do to anybody else, you more or less say the result will be whatever the result is, and if it means no more humans, then it means no more humans. Oh.
So did you read the comments on the article? People being
Yes, I
like,
did.
well, they're
Yes,
like,
I did.
life is rape. I've
Yes.
accepted this.
Yeah, I saw that. It's crazy. You see, this is post facto rationalization. You don't like a result, so then you rationalize a reason for how to make that result go away, which I think is just BS. And by the way, a lot of our legal system works that way. A judge looks at the result that they want, then they make up the legal reasoning to get to that result.
Because the laws are so complex, you can just make it.
Exactly. I mean, for example, just not that I really want to go off on this tangent, but I'll say it quickly. Just take a look at the tariffs. If you take a look at the authority that is being given to the president on tariffs, it's meant to be emergency authority. there is no way that Congress can give away all of its power. It can't be done. It's not constitutional. But will a court actually stand up and stop them? I have no idea.
Because there are so many laws written, you can just come up with any convoluted.
Exactly. You can just make up anything you like, but it's clearly not constitutional. I mean, I don't even know how this is a close call. But there it is. You know, there's the old joke that my lawyer friends always tell me. We have a slam dunk case. Absolutely slam dunk. It means we have an 8 out of 10 chance of winning.
Because the judge is just a emotional appeal to the judge.
Yep, exactly. And my mother, who was a lawyer, used to tell me that her principle was if the facts are in your favor, you argue the facts. If the law is in your favor, you argue the law. And then she would wait with a pregnant pause, waiting for you to ask the obvious question, which is, what if neither of them is in your favor? And then, of course, she would triumphantly say, then you found the table.
Yeah. You don't think humanity is doomed?
If you mean for sure, I think the answer is no. If you mean, is it one of a range of possibilities? Absolutely.
You think that humans might never go extinct?
Well, it depends on what you mean by human, because I mean we're already at the point where we can do germline experimentation and so on, right? So I don't know 50,000 years from now if humans of today would even be able to breed with the humans of 50,000 years.
Yeah, with the descendants.
Yeah.
We'll say.
Will there be descendants of humans in the future? I think the chances are probably more yes than no, but am I sure of it? Not.
Indefinitely.
Well, I don't know how long indefinite is. I mean, 5 billion years is a long time.
Okay, let's say 5 billion years.
Let's say 5 billion years. No, I would say the chances of an extinction level event occurring, even if humans don't do it to themselves, over 5 billion years is pretty darn high. Which, by the way, is why Elon Musk is right when he says that we need to get off the planet if we wish to have a species that carries on. But of course, Mars will be swallowed up in 5 billion years too. So. No.
But
no.
if you split between 2 planets, you rule out all the single asteroid.
Exactly. So you lower the probability somewhat, yes. Exactly.
Or probably a lot.
Probably a lot. Although, you know, you can still think of scenarios where, for example, a star wanders by close to the sun and you end up with a binary star system, and I have no idea what exactly the planets will eject some.
Probably eject them, yeah.
So I don't know what happens then. And that's a chaotic system, so we can't make any predictions about it anyway. It has free will.
A binary star system. I think ejection would be a good way for us to all die.
Well, it would be quick.
Would it?
Because it would be pretty quick because the Earth would freeze.
How quickly?
It depends how fast you got ejected. It depends how quickly the orbit started to become bigger and bigger and bigger. But you know, even a few percent will start to create more and more ice ages. So as an extension level event, it would be relatively quick.
But what if we just got ejected radially away from the sun at a high speed? So let's say effectively the sun disappears.
How would that happen though? How would that happen though?
It couldn't.
I don't see how it could.
No. You would need to place another very large mass that moves in a very weird way.
Yeah, that's right. To get it to eject radially, yes. On a tangent, yes. I think that's right. That would be difficult. What you can see is to get an unstable system where the Earth is now revolving around more than one star, and those stars are revolving around each other, and then you'll get lots of planetary ejection, things like that. Who knows what happens then?
Well, I guess we'll see. All right. Do you have any other questions or comments or things you want to say, or should we wind down?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to wind down or carry on with any more questions you have. This has been an enormously fun conversation for me.
I agree, and I appreciate it. I mean, yeah, I think we're almost at 2 hours, so if there's... I mean, I think we've covered everything
So
that I...
my appeal to your listeners is please buy my book, because the more of my copies of my book you buy, the more I'll be able to write a second book. So publisher will be happy to buy a book from me in the future.
There you have it. Okay, well, is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Or...
No, it's been a fabulous conversation, and it's been fun to meet you.
Yeah, it was great to meet you too. All right, great. Well, then, let's end it here.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm gonna hit stop record. Are there any topics that you're thinking about a lot lately that you wanna talk about now, or do you want me to? So I read a couple of your blog posts.
Okay. Okay.
I came up with some arguments about them, or questions, argumentative questions.
All right.
But,
You can start.
but they're kind of older, so it might, I don't know if you want to talk about that, or if there's something that you're thinking about now that we should talk about.
I mean, I could say about some things about what I'm thinking about now, but I always prefer to answer questions. I like that more. So
Okay.
ask me questions, and I'm sure what I'm thinking about now will come up, because these things often take a long time in terms of thinking about them.
Okay. So I read your essay, "Who's Afraid of Kathleen Stock?"
Okay. Right. Okay.
Okay, and so this was an essay you wrote about the kind of progressive pushback you got to including Kathleen Stock's essay about the orthodox account of sexual orientation in the latest edition of The Philosophy of Sex, which you are lead editor of.
Correct. Yes.
Is that all true?
Yes, I am the lead editor of the latest edition. It's the 8th edition of the Philosophy of Sex, and there was some slight pushback, mostly on Facebook, from some people who thought that adding the essay by Kathleen Stock was a mistake.
Because it's transphobic.
The essay itself is not really transphobic. The essay is about mostly sexual orientation, and sexual orientation and issues of gender are connected, but they're not the same topic. So that particular essay by Stock is about sexual orientation. She mentions gender in it, which we can go into if it's...
Well, the essay says there's only two sexual orientations, essentially. That there's homosexuality and heterosexuality, and then some people have both or neither, or whatever. Just varying amounts of attraction to the same and opposite sex.
Right. That's correct, yes.
And this is transphobic in the eyes of progressives because it says that sex is like real, or is the baseline cause of sexual orientation rather than gender, and it also says there's only two sexes, which some
Well, it
people
could be
find.
it could be multiple reasons. I mean, one reason for the pushback on including the essay might actually have nothing to do with the content of that essay by Stock, but it has to do with Kathleen Stock's general view about trans women being women. And so, in her book Material Girls, for example, she basically thinks that trans women aren't really women; they're not biologically women. But that doesn't mean that we should disrespect their identity and so on and so forth. But anyway, it's because
But that is disrespecting their identity.
it could be, but you're better off asking Kathleen Stock about these questions, basically. I mean, we can go into it a little bit, but what I'm trying to say is that one of the reasons why people objected to the inclusion of her essay in the book is not so much the content of that particular essay, but her general stance about trans issues in general, basically. Now, you're also right to point out potential other reasons, which is that when you claim that there are basically two sexual orientations, heterosexuality and homosexuality, what you are basically doing is denying some sort of role of attraction to others based on their gender identity or gender presentation, really. So in that respect, it can be objected to on that grounds as being somehow transphobic.
Yeah, I mean, when trans women identify as women, a lot of that is sexual identification or with respect to sexual relationships. They don't want to be seen as women if they could choose, you're only going to be seen as a woman in the bedroom but nowhere else, or you'll be seen as a woman everywhere else but a man in bed. They might choose to be seen as a woman in bed. I personally believe.
It could be. I mean, it depends on the issue. I mean, it depends on the individual. So, for example, for some trans women, for some trans women, they are not attracted to other women. Basically, they're not attracted to other men. They're attracted to other women. So, in a sense, when they become trans women, they sort of become lesbians in that respect. If we go down that line, but to most trans people, the issue of gender identity is not reducible just to the question of what they prefer to be in bed or how they prefer to be considered in bed. It's a whole gamut of way of living your life, basically. It includes the sexual dimension, obviously, but it's not just about that. Whereas when it comes to sexual orientation, it is in a way much narrower in scope because sexual orientation typically targets a person's sexual attractions to other people on certain kind of bases or for certain kind of reasons, to put it that way. It need not engulf or include other aspects of people's lives. So, for example, just to give a personal example, I consider myself to be a homosexual. I don't really like the label gay because, to me, the label gay brings with it a whole cultural way of living, a certain kind of lifestyle, basically, which I'm not affiliated with very much. Basically, certainly not now. I used to be much more earlier in my age. So, sexual orientation targets, in a way, a much narrower scope of a person's identity. It could target a much larger scope. Obviously, it depends on the individual. But in that respect, it's different from gender identity, which tends to be much more encompassing of a person's.
But it still carries with it in the basis of sexual orientation. It carries with it a definition of people as either male or female, and I think that is what people object to.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. So what they're you mean to say that what they're objecting to Kathleen Stock is I'm sorry, I'm not. Can you say that one more time?
I think what they're objecting to is the definition of people as male or female, and not explicitly saying this, but implicitly saying that that is basically it. That at foundationally we're just males and females.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I think, but I mean, Stock doesn't deny the fact. So if you're thinking about Stock's view, She doesn't deny the fact that we're not just sex. I mean, obviously she agrees that we have that gender plays a role in the world, because there is a reason, for example, why women are subjugated as women. Of course, it has to do with their biological sex, with their reproductive abilities, and so on and so forth. There's a history to that. But she's not denying that people have certain sorts of gender identities. I think the issue maybe with Stock is the question of how far apart does gender and sex come, basically. So for a lot of philosophers, they want to have a sharp separation between one's gender identity and one's sex. So there's a sense in which one can belong to a certain sex but have a completely different gender identity. Whereas I think with other philosophers, the two are much more tied together rather than not, basically.
Yeah, but
now,
you just referred to a trans woman who is attracted to women. You said other women, and you said they're sort of a lesbian. This is clearly in contrast with Stock's view. Stock would not see a trans woman having sex with a woman as a lesbian. She would define them as a straight couple.
Yes, but based on the sex of the person, yes.
Yeah, so I think that's the objection. I don't think it has to be explicitly said, or gender even has to be mentioned in the essay. Claiming straightness or claiming the definitions of straightness and gayness to be basically something that you can't change. It implies that you cannot turn yourself into a woman, and then if a man wants to have sex with you after you've turned yourself into a woman, after you've transitioned, they're just gay, and you're both just gay.
Yes, Stock is committed to that position, it would seem, and she would have to basically say that attractions based on different gender presentations is going to be not a type of sexual orientation, but is going to be some sort of preference within one's sexual orientation. Yes.
Yeah, so I guess the part I feel argumentative about is it seems like you're not really acknowledging that the inclusion of this essay is a signal that trans women aren't women on some level.
It could be, but of course you don't include essays in a book just because you agree with them. You include essays in a book because they can give interesting arguments and they allow people for give and take. I mean, there's not a single philosophical argument that I know of that is not basically subject to criticism. So we don't include essays in books just because you're trying to signal something. You often include criticism. Yes.
There's a big gap between saying something that you think and saying that thing is therefore not subject to criticism. I'm not saying that there's any implication that you think that no one should criticize the essay, but I'm saying that the inclusion in the book seems to signal that the editor believes that trans women are not women.
No, I don't think that's true at all. I think it doesn't signal anything about the faults of the editor. So if you look at a lot of the essays in the book, they all take up certain positions about all sorts of topics. It would be a hard stretch to say that the editor agrees with all of these positions or tries to signal something from them. I think that's a big stretch.
I think it's a stretch for you to say that the inclusion of the essay does not signal anything about your thoughts about the essay. Surely you have to think that the essay has some merit or some validity.
It can have certain philosophical. It can have certain philosophical merit in terms of the ability to provide certain arguments. It also defends a very traditional conception of sexual orientation that most people at large seem to agree with, which is
but that's different.
No, hold on, let me finish my sentence, please. So it defends certain kind of position that most people agree with about sexual orientation. So in that respect, it's good to have an essay in the book that defends that position, because this is what most people believe. A lot of the students who read these textbooks also believe that. So when you put that kind of essay in conversation with the students and the general public, you are doing what a book like this is supposed to do in terms of raising discussions about these issues.
Well, most students think that you go to hell if you have gay sex.
That's not true. I mean, a lot of the students who go to colleges and universities are very...
Okay, most people think that. Most people think that.
I don't think so. I think even in today's America, basically, even Republicans have basically made their peace with homosexuality. I mean, if you look at
in the world, though?
In the world, no, but I mean, I don't know how much this book, if you're still talking about the book that I've edited, I'm not sure how much this book is used in Russia or in Pakistan. I mean, it's designed to be used in the United States, Canada, and most Western universities. And even if it is used in other parts of the world that find homosexuality to be immoral or wrong, that's not an argument. I mean, I'm not sure exactly where you're going with that, but
Well, my point is that most people believe a lot of stupid things, so that just because it aligns with the views of the reader doesn't mean that you're going to include it. I don't see that as a defense.
I didn't say that it aligns with the views of the reader. You're the one who said that, because I was trying to say that it reflects the views of the common of what people commonly believe about sexual orientation as a concept, not about whether homosexual sex is right or wrong. You sort of changed the subject. Kathleen Stock's essay is about the concept of sexual orientation.
Yeah. I gave the homophobia example to say that just because most people reading the book or most people in the world believe something, that's not a justification for including the view in the book.
No, but in light of certain new theories about sexual orientation, it would be good to have an essay that defends a more traditional conception because it pairs nicely with other essays in the book. So, for instance, there is another essay by Robin Dembroff about sexual orientation that is a very different approach to sexual orientation than Kathleen Stock's. It's very novel, and it's one that's likely that most people will find a little bit puzzling. Certainly, it diverges a lot from the way they have tended to think about sexual orientation. So positing the two essays next to each other could make for a very good discussion. And we also have other essays in the book about asexuality. There's an essay about zoophilia, and so there are a few essays about sexual orientation.
Yeah, but the zoophilia essay is not going to argue that humans aren't human, or that dogs are human, or that camels are. You know what I mean? It's not.
Neither does Stock's essay make that argument. So you are making certain inferences from the essay, but the essay itself doesn't make that argument. That is left to the teacher and the students to discuss the essay as they see fit.
Okay, so your position is that Kathleen Stock's essay that says that implies that a trans woman having sex with a man are just two gay guys. That you can one logical step away, you can make that conclusion, but that doesn't count as her arguing that trans women aren't women?
It doesn't count as part of the argument. This is an implication of the argument.
Well, it's an assumption. It's an assumption made. The argument is made on top of the assumption that.
It could be, but this is one way you criticize an argument. Sometimes you criticize an argument by saying, well, in order for the argument to succeed, it has to make this assumption. Or another criticism of an argument, you can say something like, an implication of the argument is this. This is all up for grabs, basically.
I know, I'm not saying it's not up for grabs. I'm saying the inclusion of the essay strongly signals that the editor of the book agrees with the premise, which is not even mentioned. Because if you had to prove that premise, if you were the kind of editor who says, well, wait a second, you haven't shown that a trans woman isn't actually a woman, so what's your basis for calling them this couple a gay couple? You're not saying that. You're including it in the book, presumably because she doesn't have to make that argument to you because you already agree with it.
As I said earlier, we include essays in the book that reflect different types of positions. That doesn't signal anything about what the editors believe. I mean, if you ask any editor of any philosophy book or any other kind of book, they are not going to basically say that the inclusion of certain essays signals anything about their beliefs. The only thing it signals about their beliefs is that the fact that they are able to raise interesting discussion in the class, that it's important for the students to know about and to discuss, and so on and so forth.
I don't buy this. I think that I would almost say the purpose of the essay is to attack the narrative that trans women are women without actually bringing it up.
That's fine. That's your view, and I already told you of my view. So maybe we can move on to something else.
Do you think trans women are women?
In some sense, yes.
To what extent?
In the gender identity sense, in the sense that this is the kind of identity that they have adopted, and so I don't have any views about the metaphysics of gender. I haven't made up my mind. It's not my area of specialty, but I do think, in an ethical, moral sense, they ought to be treated as women at the very minimum.
But I'm asking whether they are. We're saying they should be treated as women implies that they're not.
Well, it doesn't. It could be saying that they should be treated as women is compatible with both metaphysically them being women, but also not metaphysically being women. And there is a lot in the philosophical literature on this. It's not in my area of specialty, however, so I don't want to pontificate about it because I haven't. It's not my area. I mean, I specialize in philosophy of sex, not philosophy of gender.
Does the word woman fall under the category of sex or gender?
To me, it falls mostly under gender, but then again, gender properties are also very much closely associated with sex properties. When you have a human being who's female sex, typically they tend to be women also. So it's not, you can't just separate them from each other.
But in your essay about pansexualism, you talked about having sex with men. You didn't say males. Like, clearly in your writing, you use the words men and women. But are you saying that when you use those words, you're stepping outside of your own area of expertise, referring to gender instead of sex, and using words that you can't comment on the definition of?
No, I'm just saying that when I say men, I typically have sex with men who are also males. And I use the word men because the usual association is between males, is that men are also males. Now, there are exceptions to this, obviously, but it doesn't mean that every time you use the word man, you're somehow insisting that all males are men. No. I mean, those
so
words.
When you say I have sex with men, the meaning of your sentence to you is I have sex with people who consider themselves men?
No, that means I have sex. That means I have sex with men who are also male, basically.
But what does the word man mean in that sentence?
You know, I mean, you're asking some difficult questions about philosophy of language. I'm using the word man in the common way that it is usually used.
Commonly, it means male.
It means male, yeah, yeah. But that doesn't mean that metaphysically speaking, we have decided that all men are male. That's a whole different position. That's what some philosophers of gender discuss when they talk about the meaning of the word man or the meaning of the word woman. But you also have to make a distinction between using the word in certain kinds of contexts, and they usually have certain common meanings. So when you don't signal that you are using the word in a special way, that is taken to be that it's used in the common meaning. And commonly, when we talk about men and women, the general assumption is that they are also male and female, basically.
But that's the argument about Kathleen Stock's essay, is that she is, I think in part, and again, I don't know her, and I've never heard of her before today, but I would assume that part of the reason she wrote the essay is to reassert, by implication, the definition of woman as adult human female and male as adult human male. And that reassertion goes unchallenged by its inclusion in the book because she doesn't even have to make the argument. Presumably you agree with it. And then also, when I hear you use the word men and women, you are saying that you're using the common definition, which is male and female. It doesn't make sense to me that you're saying it's outside of your area of expertise to talk about whether you think men are males if you're a philosopher of sex. You're saying that that's for a philosopher of gender to decide. But when the philosophy of gender people, or the progressives, are expanding the definition of man and woman, they're expanding it into the area of sex. So it's like a hedge that's being moved into your yard. I don't think you can say, well, that's not my yard.
I'm worried that you're not arguing this point very well, because you don't seem to know the subject matter very well. So when philosophers of gender talk about how we ought to use linguistic concepts, many of them use what is called an ameliorative approach. So basically they're saying those concepts should be used in this way, or we should change the concepts to be used in a certain way so that we can be more inclusive, which is fine. That's one approach to do it. But when somebody uses the word in the common usage, we're still using it in a descriptive way, as the way it is commonly used. So when I say having sex with men, I'm using the word men to commonly mean also males. So I'm not engaging in that. That's number one. Number two, there is in philosophy an area of specialization, which is philosophy of gender. And it's different from philosophy of sex. There are tons of theories of gender out there, basically. And while I'm familiar with some of them, my research is not on that subject. So I don't feel very comfortable talking about it, especially since it's a sensitive issue. Number three, you keep going back to the point that somehow I must agree with Stock, and that's why I included her essay.
Yeah.
I again urge you to look at all the essays in the book and ask yourself the question: do you think any editor of the book must agree with every single essay that they are put in the book? Of course not.
No,
That's
I don't.
stupid.
I know I'm not making that argument.
So then why are you attributing that to me when it comes to the particular essay about Stock? I think that's silly, and you need to stop doing that, basically. So maybe we should move on to something else.
Well, I would like to respond to your three arguments.
All right.
One, I am making the argument well, and it is not silly. Two, I wasn't asking you. Okay, so I was asking you for a descriptive definition. You used the word man and woman. You're saying you're not using them to mean male and female because you think that they actually mean that. You're saying that you're using the common definition, but when asked about what the words mean, you agree to the ameliorative approach, which says that we should use the words in a certain way to make people feel more included.
I didn't say that. I was pointing you in the direction that there is this other approach in terms of approaching certain linguistic concepts. That's what I was saying. So, but you were asking me about my article and about how I use the word, and I said I was using it in the common way that it is typically understood, because I didn't signal that I'm trying to use it in any different way.
Okay, so you're saying that you can use the word man to mean male because that's how it's commonly understood.
Sure,
But
yeah,
if I ask you what the word actually means, you can defer to gender philosophers and say you don't know.
No, because even many gender philosophers will say the way the word is commonly used is often used to refer to male. So, for example,
But I'm not asking you how the word is commonly used. I'm asking you what you think it means.
you